Hello. So it's still a absolutely horrible heat wave here in the UK. I had to open the windows to let the sun in so I could film, and I want you to know how much of a brave sacrifice that was, because the sun is it's evil. It's evil right now. It is the deadly laser it has often been described as. Anyway, because it's super hot, I'm not really able to do a lot of very intensive working, but I think I can read a book, and so I've chosen to read a book. Specifically, I'm going to be reading Yesteryear. So this is a book that I have been seeing recommended reviews of on YouTube, basically, but I have gleaned nothing about people's opinions on it. And I really was wanting something that I go totally blind into beyond knowing that it's pretty recent and a number of people have read it. And it has this perfectly simple concept. It is basically it can be summed up as a tagline, but I know nothing else about how this book will play out. And that's the thing that's really curious to me. This lovely hardcover, I got this for £2 at a charity shop. I mean, it's 400 or 500 pages long? 400 pages long. And I just don't know how that is. So what it's about is that it's about a trad wife going back in time, it seems, and having to live a trad life. That really is it. She is a trad wife who's popular on, and when I say trad wife, I don't know, I should explain these things even though I'm oh, everyone knows this, but trad wife is this very conservative mindset, recent-ish phenomenon of women who are saying and men who are we want to go back to a traditional lifestyle with traditional gender roles and beliefs and things. So it's very much the idea that the man is out working and the woman is at home raising the kids, but it's often very tied into a lot of ideas of homesteading as well. And the wife isn't just, taking care of the kids, she's also doing a lot of baking and maybe farming and a lot of this kind of nostalgia for a time that wasn't look at history and tradition. And yeah, so this is about a woman who is one of those. She's an influencer, and she wakes up to find that she is apparently in the past. She doesn't know what this is. I don't know. I assume it is going to be literal time travel, but I really have no idea what to expect going in, because as much as it's this interesting concept to go, okay, woman who is, she's putting on a bit of a fake air. She really has nannies and she has real industrial ovens, but she pretends that she's doing all this work by hand and that she is this rustic cottagecore trad wife, is actually forced in a scenario having to really do all that work. And I just kind of am hitting a stopping point I think about, because I'm just okay, and then what? She's gonna wake up and find that it sucks. And I guess learn that the trad wife viewpoint is wrong. And I guess that's interesting enough, okay, but I just don't know how that's going to fill a book, and I'm really curious to find out. So I will check in with you when I'm a bit further along. This is a quick trigger warning check-in. So there are a number of triggers in Yesteryear. There are more than I'm going to actually be mentioning in this video, but within the video itself, these are mostly going to be mentions. I really don't go into deep context for some of these things, and the book really doesn't either. But here are some things that I'm going to be bringing up when I discuss this. So there is quite a lot of religious trauma. There obviously is a huge amount of misogyny present. There's substance abuse. There is assault, as well as some implied, potentially sexual assaults. There is a suicide attempt, and there's definitely a lot of child neglect as child abuse. So just keep that in mind going forward. All right, so I have read, under half of Yesteryear, and I want to talk about what I've read so far before I read any further. It's not like I really hit a stopping point. I'm a ways into part 2, but there's things to check in about, basically. There's a lot of things, and then not a lot of things. So, Yesteryear. We are following Natalie Heller Mills. She is a influencer who makes kind of homesteading. She doesn't identify as a trad wife, but also when her daughter, she has a tween daughter, asks, "Are you a trad wife?" She's like, "Well, what's so wrong with being traditional?" Is living this kind of idyllic lifestyle on the surface. It's what she presents. But also, because we are in first person, it is what she presents on that level too. There's a lot of things that are obviously off or wrong or not going as well, but she has this very strong voice that is very straightforwardly telling you what things are, what's going on. So, yeah, the first part of the book is pretty short. It basically is telling us about Natalie and what her life is like. We basically get a single day in the life on this ranch that she and her husband Caleb live on with their, I want to say 5 children. But as I say that, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, let me think. They haven't been important yet. The oldest one is Clementine. She's the most notable. Then they have 2 sons and 2 daughters. So they're at 5, and she is 6 months pregnant with a 6th one. So they've had a lot of kids. And Natalie is, well, one thing that I'm still drawing a lot of my feelings and conclusions about this book, this character, what it's doing, what it's saying. And I just kind of feel like for a lot of it, I'm just not far enough in to say. I'm still going to tell you my opinions on stuff, but I also have this very distinctive feeling of I don't have enough information. I haven't seen enough to really know what to say. Because Natalie is obviously a non-likable narrator, which makes sense. I think the book does some good things in that she isn't like she's not as stereotypical as you would imagine, as I certainly imagined going in. Like, the beginning, this first part, has a lot of its most explicit humor to it, where it is very much doing a lot of parodying and, like, referencing things about our current culture and the things that she's presenting to the world, and contrasting that with, what the actual reality is, what her opinions are. The humor doesn't work too much for me. I think that it's the kind of thing where, because it's parodying something that is, obviously there's a ridiculousness to the trad wife thing, but it also is just one of those things that feels so insidious to me that I don't find it as funny to make fun of. Like, I think it's good to make fun of it, but at the same time, it's so real that even taken to more extremes and even put in a bit of absurdity, I'm still just like, yeah, but that's really happening, and there's some concerning things about our current cult. Like, it just kind of gets a little bit too much of a bummer that I really feel the humor works for me, if that makes sense. But yeah, okay. It's hard to know what's important to talk about as well. Natalie, in talking about her as a narrator, she also isn't she's not naive. She's not just this, exactly the stereotype you would think she is. She's actually the brains and the drive behind her business as this influencer who she has a producer and several nannies. Their farm has farm hands. These are all things that are carefully hidden away and things. And she's the one who has been driven and built this business for herself and for her family. She is presenting as this idea of obviously just a good Christian housewife. She's very Christian. But her husband, Caleb, is just explicitly, he's useless. He's a complete idiot. She is the one who, what she talks about right at the start of the book is that she is just a very driven person. She is determined, she is driven, she has this ability to just lock in, and so she was always very successful academically in all aspects of life except for being liked. She never really was liked, but she got very good grades. She went to college at 17. She is intelligent, in her viewpoint, we still see her, obviously, it's funny to kind of weigh this idea of like, she's intelligent, but also be in the viewpoint of this very, I want to say fundamentalist Christian, this very traditional viewpoints Christian, I don't know if we know her denomination, woman, where you do see a lot of things that are obviously, I don't want to say not intelligent, that's kind of a loaded thing to say. Things that I would disagree on an intellectual basis. I don't know. Look, it's this interesting like mixed thing, but I am glad that she is somebody who is a leading protagonist and that we aren't just falling down to making fun of like a dumb influencer woman. Sometimes I think that her intelligence and her viewpoints get a bit muddled where I'm not entirely sure what her opinion is. Sometimes she does say something that seems, I want to say too, like she reflects on like how America hates women at one point, but also she super hates women. And she hates women a lot, actually. She's always is projecting onto other women, thinking about the angry women online. But then she does have this like bit a bit later in where she kind of goes on a monologue, I mean, it's all internal, about how America hates women and how there's misogyny everywhere. But also she really hates when in college people talk about the patriarchy and blame their problems on it. So sometimes I think that there is this thing with her voice where the author is trying to keep her to the views that she would have, but also still wants to give her a couple more woke ideas that I don't always feel fit cohesively. Anyway, I think that the best thing to kind of introduce you to her voice is to read some stuff from her. God, the start of the book is already very strong. Okay, I'm gonna read this. I feel like I need to get my voice up a few octaves. I need to kind of fall into my customer service, which is like, I haven't done this for so many years in terms of customer service. I used to, cashier. I used to be a cashier in America specifically, and they make you talk like this. Hi, how can I help you today? How are you doing? Hi. Okay, this is about my level. I have to do the fake little smile thing because I'm a cashier in America. Okay. And who was I? A flawless Christian woman. The manic pixie American dream girl of this nation's deepest, darkest fantasies. The mother every woman wanted to be and the wife every man wanted to come home to. Like a nun in a porno, it didn't make sense. But also, by God, it worked. My name is Natalie Heller Mills, and I was perfect at being alive. She has a lot of these internal thoughts where she's either quoting the Bible or thinking to herself. I want to talking about her voice. I'm moving through. I have a couple of notes in this one, so I'm just quickly checking. What I want to read about her voice is also how much she... Okay. This is her bit on tradwife as a term. I know that trad is short for traditional. Some people call women like me a traditional wife, for obvious reasons. By some people, I mean the angry women. The angry women were the ones who called me a trad wife, who said trad, like it was short for something evil, like traditional wasn't a fine word in any sane person's universe. But these women were not sane, nor were they happy, nor were they big believers in personal accountability. Instead of asking themselves why they spent so much of their precious time on earth scrolling through other people's lives when they could be making their own home-cooked meals, or even offering eye contact to their own children, instead of asking themselves why they spent so much time bathing in their own rancid jealousy when they could be building their own lives into something they were proud of, they were apparently far more interested in drinking a bottle of wine each night and typing their little hearts out in online chat rooms about me. I suppose I'm assuming that these women were winos, but judging by the number of typos riddled throughout each of their messages, I'd call it an evidence-based assumption. Tradwives were ruining the country by staying married to their husbands, apparently. Tradwives were destroying America because they actually like spending time with their children. And those are, of course, misspelled. So, you know, we get a lot of that. It's pretty heavy, mixed in with the first section as well. There's these interjections where it sounds like she is being interviewed and responding, and I can't tell if that is actually happening in any way. It doesn't seem to be internal, but there are these broken up paragraph things that are as if she's being interviewed, like, but they're responding to her internal monologue a lot of the time. Like, do your children enjoy being filmed? And then she replies, oh, they love it. That one isn't related to anything, but at one point her mind is thinking about the ranch hands, and then the interview section comes in. Hold on, you have ranch hands too? I don't really know what to make of it. The first section of this book is, like, interesting enough in that it's setup, but at the same time, for setup, it is a setting that we abandon very quickly, because again, the point of this book is that she's about to wake up in the past. So we're introduced to her husband, Caleb, her many children, her producer, and her nannies. Her producer, Shannon, her name is, I think she might be important later, is, like, quitting the job for reasons that the Natalie thinks of as having an affair with Caleb, but the interview question interjection says allegations of horrific assault. So I kind of lean towards Natalie as having an incorrect interpretation of events there with Shannon. There also is this strange recurring thing about Shannon having these nightmares of the ranch on fire, and Shannon as well. There's something else where Natalie is thinking about a plan, some plan that she and her father-in-law are going to enact. There's some things that are kind of left open here that have yet to come back in any way, because again, she's about to wake up in the past. And I only assume that, like, after part 2, which is when we are in the past mostly, after that we're going to return to the, again, saying present is kind of the wrong term because it is her present, but return to the 2020s or whatever this book takes place in, and that some of that will come back in some way. But yeah, Natalie is leading a pretty standard day. The end of the first part is her just, like, going to sleep. There's nothing that seems to, like, trigger or represent why she wakes up in the past. We have no information about that this time. But yeah, she suddenly does. And when I say wake up in the past, she wakes up in a version of her reality that is completely different, but it is very much the same. And I do like this. I guess I wasn't really thinking about how this would be done when I was thinking about it, but instead of being, like, exactly her children, she does have mostly the same children, but there is something extremely uncanny about that, where she has a 12-year-old daughter, but the daughter has a different name, and it's a name that she was thinking about picking for one of her kids. Like, she really liked the name, but she didn't. And this daughter looks like her daughter, like it would be, it is her daughter, but also isn't the same as her 12-year-old from the 2020s. And this extreme uncanny feeling, and her kids are different. Her house, which was constructed specifically to look super rustic and have a lot of, like, secretly there's, like, dishwashers and fridges and things, but it's built to look old-timey, but in this perfect curated way. She wakes up and she is actually in, like, the 1880s, in the middle of nowhere on this ranch, and it is as it would be. It's there's not much heating, they don't have a lot of resources or clothing. She's actually living this frontier life, and we get some bits referencing the idea too that, like, growing up she heard a lot of these stories about, like, the brave pioneers on the frontier and things. And there's something being done with, I mean, obviously, like, the nostalgia, I say nostalgia, but the way that, especially in America, the past and history are put as these, like, golden examples of, like, these brave people doing these excellent, wonderful, noble things and surviving out there with their plucky, like, heroism, like, all of those sorts of ways that Americans, especially a certain type of American, which is what Natalie represents, look at the past versus the realities of actually what happened there. And on so many different levels what happened there. Not just like all of the horrific things that were going on, which the book hasn't got to at this point, but also just how miserable life actually was and how many people died. Again, the book hasn't really got there, but I see that that's obviously like a contrasting theme going on. So Natalie wakes up and is just pretty freaked out. That's sort of what it's been. She has been there, and Caleb, who is her like actual fail son of a husband, he is the youngest brother in this like political dynasty family where he kind of has never really had a lot of ambition. She thinks that he's not very smart. But here it's a version of him who is like what grew up in this time period, and he is very aggressive and, you know, a man from the 1880s frontier. Her children are all grim and serious. Her oldest child, who is like 12, is kind of running the household, especially because when she wakes up, she's just so freaked out that all she's doing is trying to run away or, you know, say out loud like what's going on, because she's trying to figure out, was she kidnapped? What is this? And she doesn't know, and like it makes sense that she doesn't know, and it's very confusing, but also as I've read a number of chapters from here, it is just kind of like she's here, okay, but every single chapter I've been encountering, I'm interested in this world of the past and her feelings and things on it, but she has been stuck in the stage of just reacting and freaking out. She tries to run away, and Caleb like just fully slaps her to the ground and she goes unconscious. Another time she just tries to run away and her foot gets caught in an animal trap and she requires stitches and is quite injured by that. She's just afraid and freaking out, and her personality is obviously different because of the situation, but there is this contrast that I'm feeling so much more because she has such a strong voice in the first part. And then she wakes up here, and I'm not surprised that she's acting terrified and sounds different, but it really is so much different that it kind of feels, I don't know, it just feels like very removed in a way where she doesn't, I don't know, I'm struggling to explain it. But again, I'm still kind of fairly, like, I'm under halfway in this book, I'm getting close to halfway, so I'm still waiting to see with a lot of this stuff. And Natalie, in these past times, nothing's really happened. She's just sort of tried to run away, been freaking out. There's some stuff where her eldest daughter of the 1800s talks to her like this is something that has happened before. She talks to her like Natalie has a history of freaking out like this is some sort of episode that she's having. And I don't know what to make of this yet, because it's not like I think that there's going to be a twist where it's like she's always been in the 1800s. That doesn't make any sense at all. But certainly her adapting to this world is, her daughter here says, well, starting with actually Natalie speaking, she says, "I want to go home," I whisper. "Please take me home." "But Mama," Maeve starts. Mary cuts her off. These are her two daughters. "Will you get some firewood, Maevie?" Maeve hesitates. Her bright, big eyes lock sadly on me, and then she nods and walks to the door. As soon as Maeve is outside, Mary crosses the room in 4 short steps and crouches by my chair so that we are face to face. "I'm gonna say this once," she says in a decisively less friendly voice than the one she used of Maeve, "so listen closely. You are my mother." "I'm not your mother," I nearly growl, but I clench my teeth. "This is your home," Mary continues. "This is your life. You're behaving like a child right now, and you're not a child. You're a grown woman with children of her own to take care of. And you know what? Your actual children can't stand when you act like this, especially Maeve. It makes her very upset." My mouth is open. I'm about to protest. This is not my life. You're not my children. But she barrels forward, leaving no room for me to speak. "You're a grown woman," she repeats. "You should know not to walk willy-nilly through the woods during trapping season. So really, you have no one to blame but yourself. Now, she says, and claps her hands like she's trying to startle me out of hypnosis. I'm going to give you 2 options. You can pull yourself together for dinner, or you can go back to your bedroom and shut the door. So which is it? Bed or dinner? And again, Mary is 12. At least Clementine was 12, and I believe that Mary's said to be the same age. Clementine's her older daughter in, like, the 2020 time. But also, it's like the 1800s, so, like, yeah, girls were acting a lot more mature at young ages. She had a lot more responsibilities in looking after things, especially with the way that she's talking here, making it sound like this is something that has happened before. But again, I don't really know what to make of these things. And the only thing that really happens, the only thing that happens that's like, it's something so far, is that Natalie, while walking outside at one point, notices something in the dirt, and she digs it up, and she is pretty sure that it is made of plastic. So I'll read that, because this has to be important. I drop to a one-legged crouch and pick gently at the nub until I'm able to pull it out of the packed earth. It rolls lightly across my palm, leaving a trail of dust, coming to rest at the center of my love and lifelines. It's plastic. It looks like a broken piece of a lapel microphone, the kind you clip to a shirt collar or tuck away by a windowsill. I've used them thousands of times before. I scrutinize the little black nub. I haven't been taken away to some faraway film set, but perhaps the film set has come to me. And this kind of convinces her, and what she starts to just only believe at this point is that she's on some sort of reality TV program, that there are secretly hidden cameras everywhere, and somehow she has been kidnapped to a reality TV show for, who knows what motives. And I think that this is all hard coping. It just doesn't make any sense. Similarly, the piece of plastic she found, she has yet to, take it out of her pocket and really inspect it. I have a feeling that it's going to turn out that she's just wrong. I think that it's going to be like a rock. I feel like a rock and plastic have such different textures and appearances, it would be a hard mistake to make. But also, she is really freaking out and looking for a way to cope and explain her situation. So I can imagine that she finding some sort of thing that looks a bit like plastic and putting it quickly in her pocket after looking at it and convincing herself it's part of a microphone is something that she would do. And yeah, I don't know what is going to be. I don't know if there's going to be a twist. I don't know what to expect. I kind of think that at some point she'll just fall asleep and wake up again in the 2020s, and then maybe later on we'll get alternating between them in some way. And I can't think of what a connection would be. It doesn't make sense that it's a reality TV show because this is set in modern times and there's so many ridiculous things that would have to happen. She is not only in a perfect replica of her house, but it's like the 1800s. She's also in it's a perfect replica of the area around her house, like the mountains in the distance. And that is possible with, I guess, sets and such. She hasn't left the property at this point. She ran into the woods and was hit by a trap. So maybe it is a Truman Show, big dome. But again, why, how the people that she is with look exactly like they would be her children. Caleb looks the same, but he acts completely different. She's also no longer pregnant. That's another thing, is that when she wakes up in the 1800s, she's not 6 months pregnant anymore. And she just woke up. So there's just a lot going on there that I have to assume that she's literally just been time traveled in some way, but I just don't know. Right. So the other thing going on in this book is that while we've been spending a bit of time in the past, we've actually been spending a lot of time in the more recent past, because these chapters have been alternating with Natalie's life story, which is a section that I find, I don't think that they're bad. I don't think that they're not interesting. I don't think that they serve no purpose, but I want to spend more time in the 1800s stuff. I think that Natalie's life story is interesting, but I'm not interested in it as much. basically we follow her from, she goes to college, she winds up going to like Harvard. She actually, again, she's very smart, she got very good grades, and she never had any friends, she just isn't liked by anybody. So she is kind of hoping that, like, leaving her small town in the middle of nowhere, she's gonna find some sort of like intellectual oasis of some kind. And then going to college, it's absolutely not that. But also she is so judgmental of everybody. She is projecting so much that it's not surprising that she feels everybody here sucks, because she's not actually giving them a chance. She meets Caleb there, they get married within a year, she is like pregnant immediately, and then we follow her with giving birth to her first child Clementine, and she immediately is feeling a lot of fear and negativity that she didn't really expect from being pregnant and giving birth. She winds up going into like a very strong like postnatal depression period where she just doesn't feel like the child is her child. She just doesn't like look, she finds herself very disturbed when people are like, oh, she looks just like you. And she finds herself just really like repelled by that as an idea. So yeah, we spent some time with her just like struggling and getting into fights with like Caleb, because Caleb, they're both like 18 or 19 at most. But she starts to be like, Caleb, you need to have a job. And she's so concerned with this idea of projecting a perfect appearance to the outside that she's like, well, she's staying with like her mother in a suburban area. Every day, all of these husbands are leaving to work and all the wives are at home cooking and such. And her husband isn't leaving the house. And she feels so like mortified by that she is just telling Caleb, you need to get a job. And he's like, I'm super, super rich and I don't really know what I want to do. And it's actually super normal for people to not immediately go into work after college. He's older, so he actually graduated. She wound up dropping out. And she eventually like calls on his mom about how he's like so ambitionless, and they get called over to go live with his family for a bit. Yeah, like it's kind of like, it's interesting enough. You get a lot of insight into her, but also at the same time, it just kind of feels like I don't know, like I'm just sort of, okay, I want to spend more time looking at her life and her family now, and getting this context of her past and her upbringing is interesting enough, but we already have been getting that from like the initial chapters and the chapters set in the past. So seeing it all actually play out, I'm not immediately, I'm struggling with this because again, I'm still formulating a lot of ideas and thoughts about this book. I think that it will hopefully come together more so. I'm hoping that I will feel a reason that we have to spend so long recapping all of Natalie's life up till the point of her being an influencer. I'm hoping that the time in the 1800s will get more interesting as well. Like, I'm most interested in that, but we mostly just have Natalie being freaked out and then uncomfortable and confused, and that's just all that we've seen so far. So yeah, I say that I like it so far, but I need to get further in and figure out exactly what is going on, what is trying to go on, and form my thoughts from that. Hi, so I'm back. I've read a lot more of Yesteryear. I'm almost done, but I basically just hit a part where there's a twist. And I want to walk our way up to the twist and talk about what I think it means. I think the twist is, I can't tell you anything about it. I'm concerned it's going to be a bad one, but we're really gonna see. I was wondering if there would be one. I was kind of talking about before and I was like, oh, you know, this is some sort of time travel thing, so maybe there might be a twist in relation to that in some way, or something about that, some sort of revelation, not necessarily a twist. In this case, we are getting a twist, and I don't know about that, considering it's very, very late in. It's, part 2 of this book turns out to be the majority of it. I'm still within it. Part 3 is in like 2 chapters from where I left off. And part 3 is going to be like a much smaller section of the book. I hold this up like maybe you can see it. I don't know if you can. And yeah, Yesteryear. Okay, so I felt like I was very incoherent when I was talking about before. I hope I'm going to improve on that. I read more of it. I formed more of an opinion. At the same time, a lot of that opinion is kind of, it's not ambivalent. It's like I can look at it and appreciate it for what it's saying and doing, but I don't feel like I'm fully equipped to know if it's doing it as well. I don't feel self-conscious really about reviewing because ultimately I'm talking about a book and I'm telling you what I think about a book as I read it. And it's my opinion of those things. I think that I do have a good amount of ability to think critically while I read. At the same time, I do mostly read really bad YA books, and then on my off time, I mostly read pulp sci-fi and horror and such. I really like older vintage books. I have a whole collection of quite weird ones like that. And I do dip into a lot of other like genres sometimes, but I've not done as much reading overall since I've really done this YouTube thing because again, like writing the really long essays does take a lot of my time. So Yesteryear is striking me as a lot more of a genre that I don't really read because it's not very plot driven and it's not really character driven. I guess it's Natalie, our main character, is the story that we're following. And it's a story about Natalie, and we are learning a lot about Natalie's life, who she is, how she is the way she is. There's a lot of really like interesting and insightful observations, I think, about quite specifically Natalie and her upbringing and the way of like perception and facades and the way that women are performing roles, women performing as an influencer's performing, but also the idea of like the perfect Christian wife as a performance. A lot of stuff about that. I just, at the same time, feel quite outside a lot of that because it's not something that I relate to at all, which you don't have to relate to something to appreciate it or like it. And I do appreciate and like it. At the same time, I do have that feeling of like, this would be a lot more impactful if I had like any connection to a lot of the themes going on, because this really is a book that without having much like character development for anybody, I mean, Natalie is developing in that we're unfolding Natalie, but like nobody else. And without much plot overall, you know, it's left with like the themes and things. And the themes I think are good, but they're not themes that I have that extra level of relating to. So when it is doing these like really insightful things, I'm like, that's a good point and that's interesting. But I am missing that extra step where I think it has also to do with like, I'm autistic, so I know that like a lot of things that are treated as like a typical experience are not typical experiences for me. I just don't think about them like that. And my relationship to the idea of being a woman is also very different from a lot of what this book, and it's like, I think that this is probably like, it would be, I bet, filed under like feminist literature. The back is covered with a lot of notable names, like Roxane Gay, whose name I recognize, is one of the many like accolades on the back, and she's the reason that I know that there's a twist. I saw it after I was done recording my video last time, because her review or accolade says, absolutely unhinged. When I tell you the ending is off the rails, I am telling you the ending is off the rails. And that really surprised me because the book is so not off the rails at this point. I think it's slow and interesting, but there is just that extra step of just like, I'm sitting in a world of, again, a lot of it too about like Christian ideas and ideals, where I'm very removed from that. I wasn't raised with any religion. I have this distinct memory I was recently talking about the first time I ever heard about the Christian, like, the Trinity. and being just so confused. I remember where I was because I was in our like dining room, which is where the hermit crabs lived, and I was building a Lego race course for the hermit crabs. And I don't know the conversation or anything, but it was the first time I remember hearing about like, so like there's Jesus and there's God, and then there's this third guy, the Holy Spirit, and I was just so confused because I was like, they believe in like one guy, they believe in God. I kind of knew that part. And then I was hearing that, no, they actually have these other guys. And I was just like, so Jesus is somebody that, as far as I could tell, was like, he'd meet you in heaven and he'd like walk you up to the throne of God, who was his dad. And then you'd meet God. And I could not understand what the Holy Spirit was. Nobody really explained that. So I really grew up outside of a lot of basic like religious things beyond just not being Christian myself. So a lot of this book is about that cultural thing because that was such an influence on Natalie. And anyway, I'm talking a lot about my thoughts about this. Let me tell you a bit more about the plot and then thoughts as I go along, okay? So plot-wise, we're still divided in 2 timelines, and most of the story is actually just the flashbacks recounting Natalie's life. So we actually spend not that much time in the 1800s. That's definitely one of my biggest letdowns. I'm interested in the historical setting and the character's reaction to it, but it really is much more glossed over, shorter chapters. There's a tiny bit of intrigue, but it's so little. It's really not trying to be like dramatic, twisty revelations, which I get, but it's also not really trying to even be suggestive that there's more going on. Like, there's little bits, but they're very, very little and just not really returned to or focused on in any way. Right. So I should maybe should I start with the 1800s? I guess there's less to recap there, but it then becomes slightly more interesting. So in the 1800s timeline, Natalie is just kind of having a bad time with her weird, surreal existence, but she starts to kind of accept it. Like, she does dismiss that it was a reality TV show, but it's done in this very, like, in-passing way that I was really surprised by, where she just sort of thinks to herself, it's been, like, days, maybe weeks at this point, like, oh, that, like, pebble I found wasn't even, like, a microphone. There's no mention, like, she looking at this pebble and being like, it isn't a microphone. There's no mention that it actually is a pebble. It just is sort of her dismissing the idea entirely in passing as like an old thought. So we're not really diving on that. So she dismisses that and she becomes instead convinced that must be a test from God. And that becomes her new coping mechanism. And I think that a lot of this book is actually about coping mechanisms and how people, well, very specifically women, lock in on different things in order to survive and convince themselves that they are in any way okay or able to live with how harsh reality is. So her life is quite miserable. She spends all day like washing laundry mostly. She's washing a lye, so her fingers are burning and going numb as it gets increasingly cold. She's eating, not very good food. Caleb, her husband, is just basically never speaks to or acknowledges her and treats her generally quite badly. Her eldest daughter is Mary. Mary continues to be kind of more of a mother than her daughter, because the relationship dynamics there are this where Natalie is still kind of treated as a bit crazy and unstable. I mean, because she's been acting, running away and talking about how this isn't actually her family and this isn't her life, and obviously that's being perceived as that. And yeah, let me think, what even happens? So at one point, one of the bits of intrigue that I mention is that Mary is out gathering stuff in the woods for a suspiciously long time. She's gone for like 2 hours, And Natalie's like, were you really doing that? And she's like, yeah. Like that's kind of the level we're at. And like Mary's very upset and seems to be crying about something. And Natalie asks like, hey, what's going on? And Mary is, there was a weasel in a trap that was dying. Well, it was dying, not dead, and it was in a ton of pain, and it was really distressing to look at, and that's why I was crying. And Natalie accepts that, but then she thinks, Mary is so stoic that Mary was literally stitching up my horrible infected foot wound from when I stepped in a trap and not even blinking. So it doesn't make sense that she's super crying about this animal in pain. I would say that I think that you can make a difference between the two and feel a lot more empathy for like a dying weasel than having to deal with your apparently unreliable mother stepping in a trap and having to deal with the gross wound. I think there's a difference there, but Natalie is kind of like, that's suspicious, she's lying about something. But Natalie doesn't like follow up on that. Like this is kind of the level of just like, it's something, and that's it. Then the next thing that occurs of any note is that Caleb, she calls her husband in the 1800s Old Caleb, because it looks like it's exactly like Caleb. In fact, the details of their body are the same. Like she's like, there's a mole in the exact same spot. Like everything about him is physically identical, but he looks a bit more older, weather beaten. He's more of like a masculine, tough man, both in like how he acts, but also how he looks, where Caleb in her 2020s reality is a lot less of that. So she calls him Old Caleb the whole time. And let's see, Caleb shows up with, I'm kind of trying to like, as I do this, paw through my little notes, but my notes are not very good. They're just sticky notes on important bits of text. So I'm kind of like, oh, let me see if I can find a bit of text that's relevant. And then I am, of course, immediately struggling while I'm still talking. Let's see. Well, basically, I can tell you about it. I was just hoping I'd quickly find a quote, and I'm not. So Old Caleb shows up with some neighbors, and there's these two they're younger men. Two men who are younger than him, who are also like rugged, bearded men, and they're there because the chicken coop recently like was utterly destroyed in a big storm. So they're working on repairs for it. But there is something about the strangers that really bothers Natalie. She can't place it, and she just doesn't place it. Like, she thinks about them and she's like, there's something strangely familiar about these men. The fact that the men are there is actually a like end of chapter kind of, again, it's not really like a cliffhanger, but it almost is. And we don't have that follow-up of like, what is it about them? The next time that she like sees them, she's again struck by how there's something super familiar about their eyes. But there isn't any further investigation on that or further reflection on that. It's just sort of left here as like there's something about these two men. It's like sitting in front of me like, oh, this is gonna come back and be a revelation later. But I'm not given enough information. Like, I can make some guesses. I'll make some guesses at the end when I get to like the twist part. But it's just really like lacking that extra step where I want to be really curious, and I am really curious about what's going on here. Is Natalie time traveled or in some other weird situation? What is it? But I'm just like given next to nothing that it just becomes very difficult to actually try to actually speculate or even want to speculate because there's just nothing. And the last thing that happens, I'm really already done with the 1800 section. Like, technically speaking, there's like little things in between, but there really isn't much. Is that her younger daughter gets ill, and she and Mary decide that she is going to go and leave her homestead to find a doctor. So Mary gives her instructions on how to follow the trails around her house, and find a doctor in a nearby town. And this is very significant because it's the first time that she's actually been able to leave the property. So if we're dealing with like a Truman Show situation, this is indeed where she would hit something that would reveal her reality isn't quite what it seems. And that is indeed what happens. But before I get there, I'm going to read you a bit of text that, I think that reading about some of the quotes from this book are nice. I like the writing here. I think this is a good bit of characterization for her about walking through the forest. This is just some nice writing, I guess. I'm very sad that I can't do my like peppy influencer voice because, again, I know I mentioned this last time, Natalie's voice is quite different. Obviously, she's in the 1800s and it's like different situation, but I really miss that she sounded so different in that first part, and then the rest of the book, it's way, way toned down. So, let's see, I'm waiting to start, and I'm sorry for this awkward pause. This land is not how I remember it, or rather, this land is not how I imagined it. How many times did I walk through these snowy woods in the years and years I lived on this farm? None is the true answer. Not one time. It goes by so fast. That's what you're supposed to say when someone or something forces you to consider all the horrible time management mistakes you made as a parent, all the birthdays you forgot, all the beautiful moments that you attended, yes, but weren't really there for. What can I say? It goes by so fast. You blink and they're grown, out of the house, gone. It's true, I blinked and they were gone. Clementine, the child who made me a mother, and Samuel and Stetson, my darling young men, and Jessa, our resident firecracker, and Junebug. Well, I hadn't spent enough time with her to find her personality shorthand. Each additional child fell a little further away from me. When I try to conjure their faces now, it's only Clementine's I can see perfectly. If I think hard enough, I can manage the rough outlines of the boys. But Jessa and Junebug, they're not memories so much as they are ideas. Ancient hieroglyphs painted along the far walls of my mind. As I move through the leaves, tracing my fingers along the parchment paper feel of birch branches and the calcified wrinkles of maple trunks, I think of all the charcoal sketches of my life. All the things I meant to do, but didn't. I meant to learn Junebug's personality. I meant to walk through these woods. Meant to go fishing in our river with the boys, to pocket salmon by the handful, and then lie out on the sun-warmed rocks and listen to the rushing water. I meant to turn off my phone. I meant to revive the old apple orchard I'd been so excited about when we first bought the property. I meant to actually learn about farming and to actually learn how to grow things, not just a child or an Instagram account, but a carrot, a calf, a sapling. I meant to have a media empire, magazines and a television show and a big office in some faraway city. I meant to have sprawling gardens, acres of them, all around the ranch. Meant to know the name of every wildflower native to Idaho. Meant to learn about herbal medicines, tonics, and tinctures. I meant to meet more people in person. Really, I did. I was nearly ready. But then I blinked and I was gone. Which is to say, this, right now, is the first time I have ever walked through these woods. Nothing is recognizable to me, not the small mole-like trio of boulders I stumble across or the sloping wide curve of this trail. I feel no flickering sense of deja vu in this forest, no shudder click of confusion, the way I do when I look at the children, the horse, the barn. This forest has never been mine. Beyond, I just quite like that bit, and we're gonna go now back to the past section where we talk about Natalie's life, and again, this book is just a lot more slow and a bunch more about themes, and this idea that I really like about all of the false deja vu, all of the wrongness and dissonance about her life at this farm and her children that aren't her children, and then as she here towards the very end of the book is getting that recognition that she still didn't actually know her children as well as she just knew what she said about her children. She didn't know anything about where she lived. She never left the property particularly much. Like, she sometimes left the property to go to the nearby Target, but otherwise basically never left the property at all. And now that she's in this past area, she's felt so trapped within it. but she's just literally never been to the woods that surround her property, like the open field of the farm. Never actually been outside of that. Though I do question some of the many goals she lists for herself, because we don't really see that about her in her past sections. But there definitely is a sense that she is intelligent and driven, and she does use that intelligence and drive in many ways to get to the point of being this big influencer. But at the same time, she has limited herself in so many other ways because of this concept that she has of what the ideal is meant to be and what she is meant to be. And she's still a really unlikable character. I think that the narrative struggles with this mix of making her unlikable, but also, honestly, most of the time, she is reading as somebody who is, I'm gonna say, like, more enlightened than we're actually meant to understand her as. Sometimes she says something in dialogue or some of her actions that don't feel in tune with what she is thinking. But even as I say that, I think part of that is the point, because there's a lot about this that is about facade. So, speaking of, in the past, Natalie and Caleb are really struggling with their relationship and their life after she's given birth to their first daughter, Clementine. And Caleb just isn't showing ambition that Natalie wants, or that Caleb's parents want. He just doesn't really know what to do with himself, and he doesn't really see this expectation that he needs to be a certain ideal of a man, that he has to fit all of these roles in order to be acceptable. And Natalie is really struggling with both her depression after giving birth, but also all of the responsibilities of childcare, where Caleb does some of them, but she winds up doing like the majority of it, while at the same time needing to present herself in a way to her parents-in-law, who are these extremely wealthy, like political dynasty family, and also just in general to her mother when she talks to her family, best she can. And while she's really struggling, she starts to also like realize she looks exhausted all the time. And one of the things that is the first kind of almost outreach is that her mother-in-law, it checks in and is like, are you doing okay? And like genuinely shows an interest on if Natalie is struggling, and seems quite concerned. And then is like, I'm gonna look after the baby, you take like a shower and take care of yourself for a bit. And Natalie's appreciative of this, but then along with like a bunch of care products, like cosmetic stuff and also like the shampoo and lotion, there's also a pill of some kind. And the mother-in-law has been addicted to and abusing and increasingly abusing some sort of medication, which she talks about as, you know, basically what she does to cope. That's what she relies on and has to have. And Natalie realizes that a lot of this comfort that was being expressed to her from the mother-in-law was not just like comfort, it was also based on the fact that Natalie is visibly struggling. That Natalie looks exhausted and is struggling, but also it's clear that she's struggling. She isn't showering enough and isn't presenting herself enough as somebody who is maybe only struggling a little bit in a relatable mom way versus, you know, the actual truth of her existence. And that is the reoccurring theme for like the rest of what we're going to see of Natalie's life. I'm going to read you what is a very key conversation that really winds up defining things, which is between Natalie and her mother. So she asks her mother, how were you always so good at everything? And the mother says, you know, honey, I don't think anyone ever accused me of being good at everything before. I just mean the little things. The house was always clean, you always got dressed and put makeup on, we always had outfits planned for us. How did you do all of that on top of your job and the knitting? Well, the water sloshed in the silence. You know, I don't know if I ever really thought about this, Natty, but do you know what trick I used to do once your father had passed, God rest his soul? It still amazed me how easily she referenced his passing. She really had convinced herself he was dead. Whenever I was reaching my wit's end, I would pause for a moment and, do you know what I would do? Her voice lowered to a conspiratorial register. I would imagine I was being watched. I opened my eyes and frowned at the tiles on the bathroom floor. Watched? It's lonely, you know, housework, but it felt a bit less lonely when I pretended I had a little audience sitting on the couch with me, watching me vacuum or take out the trash, cheering me on. I didn't say anything. I felt suddenly nauseous. So that was the secret. All those years I'd spent my mother and the other women in our community marveling at how effortlessly they performed their roles as mother, homemaker, wife, all the moments I'd thought of them at college, summoning their easy joy and holding it in my hand like a lucky rabbit's foot while the girls in the dorm complained about everything. It was a lie, wasn't it? If not an outright lie, then certainly not the full truth either. They weren't actually happy. They were just pretending that they weren't. And the Lord is fine with this, with you needing to pretend? My mother didn't skip a beat. She locked into her argument and was on a roll now. Oh, I wouldn't call it pretending. It's more like a form of remembering, don't you think? After all, who do you think encouraged me to come up with that little idea to begin with? Who is our Lord and Savior, if not the original audience member for our lives? And so that becomes Natalie's guiding philosophy. And that is clearly what a lot of this book is about. It's about the performance of a person rather than actually expressing any of your feelings or even thinking about your feelings or thinking about yourself. You're thinking only about the image, about if you were watched by an audience, if you were an influencer, say, watched by an invisible perception of society and what people expect of you, and watched by God, how you would put on airs to convince yourself that you're fine or better than you are or happy or this is actually what you want, this is for the best, based not at all on yourself, but only on outside influences and perceptions. So Natalie takes this to heart and starts putting in full effort to wake up super early, doing full face makeup, but also, of course, she starts going for more like no makeup looks that take, a huge amount of work, doing all of these things, pulling extra things, and convincing herself that she is doing everything correctly, that this is the best, and kind of convincing herself that she feels better for it. So after she starts doing that, she then turns her attention towards Caleb, who she still is dealing with this fact that, he just isn't finding a career. He doesn't know what he wants to do. She asks him about it, and he's like, oh, I don't know, like an actor or a cowboy? And she's like, that's just nothing. And finally, though, he does express that what he really likes doing is playing with children. He loves to play with Clementine. And at one point, he's like, I finally realized I want to be a kindergarten teacher. He stopped by his old school and he found out that there was a teacher on leave. And he's like, I could step in and do that. And obviously there's a question of qualifications and stuff. But it is the first time he's shown real enthusiasm and interest in it. And saying this would be really fun. This would be perfect for me. I love children. I love playing with children. And, I could teach, you're teaching very simple things. It's really just about having fun and taking care of them and things like that. And he's like, I would be great at this. And Natalie immediately shuts it down. She feels he would be good at it. He would be incredible and he would love it. And he would be perfectly great. And here's a sentence or a bit. If he started this job, he would want to do it for the rest of his life, and the dream of a respectable life would be over. We would be consigned to life as a kindergarten family. And yeah, she just views it as something that is not correct and respectable. So what she does is she shuts him down by telling him that the school system is completely corrupt. So she just starts saying, do you know that in school they teach them that Christians are terrible and that marriage is destructive and gender is a construct? Do you really want that for our kids? And he's like, no, wait, do they teach that? And she's like, they teach children that white people need to feel guilty because they're slaves once. And she just kind of goes and starts telling him a bunch of misinformation and stuff. And Caleb is just like, wow, really? I didn't know that. And internally, she's actually thinking it's a job for a woman and that it just isn't right. Like, she doesn't think that he can do anything. She thinks of him as quite stupid, but internally she really is just like, that's a job for a woman. And this is something that she feels early in their relationship too, in this section, where she kind of thinks, oh my god, he's a woman and I'm a man, role-wise. I'm the one who's making all the decisions and leading the family where that's meant to be his role. And he's the one who is like, soft and likes children, and that's the woman's role. And she finds this so infuriating and frustrating and just can't really accept anything about the ability to be anything else. She gets so angry about it, but eventually comes up with this thing where at one point on like their first date, they talked a bit about like living on a farm, and Caleb was like, ooh, I really like the idea of living on a farm. And that is what drives her to say to the father-in-law, let's buy a big farm, you fund it, Caleb is going to be a farmer, and, you know, this will look really good. Like, for her, it's this chance to kind of force Caleb into what she perceives as a much more masculine role of a farmer and homesteader and things like that. Even though she, again, is annoyed because Caleb doesn't want to raise meat animals. He only wants to raise vegetables and exotic vegetables specifically. And he wants to own like a cow and a horse because he likes them and he likes animals, but he isn't interested in like any of the like hard agriculture of it. He really likes farming, but again, she really just wants him to be that like idea of a rural American man who's gritty and hard, and that's just not what he is. But she is the one who's like, I'm gonna take him away from any other opportunity and force him in that role. We're gonna go to the middle of nowhere and live on this farm. And the father-in-law, who also is very frustrated with Caleb not having much ambition, is like, that's great. And also because he's a politician, he's like, I can talk about this on stage and be like, my son is, you know, going and, you know, with the people, is like a farmer who's going and living in like the traditional right ways like men used to. And it's good propaganda for his conservative messaging. And yeah, so they move to the farm, and it's just this very long and difficult road ahead of them. The farm has been totally renovated. It actually is freshly renovated, the house, but it's not to her liking because she wants it to be this perfect ideal of a rustic home that looks like, you know, like the 1800s or whatever, but secretly is hiding all the amenities. So they're spending a ton of money to renovate the newly renovated house. As for the farm, the work is difficult and they don't know how to do it. Caleb is like on a bunch of message boards, and first he's on message boards with like real farmers, but when he buys a cow immediately, they all get really angry with him because he's not ready to take care of a cow. And the cow does die in like a week. And they run through like 7 cows in their first 3 years, just dying from like disease and not being treated properly and not having the right stuff for them. But he's just rushing in and doing it, and you know, they have the money to afford it, so they do. And so Natalie starts doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, behind Caleb's back, but also increasingly, like, he definitely becomes aware of it over time. Like, he is very insistent that he wants to raise organic vegetables with no pesticides, and the vegetables aren't going great, so they have day workers that they hire, and then eventually, like, just full on, like, farm hands. And they pay them, and she's like, you need to spray pesticides at night so Caleb doesn't find out that we're spraying them. And then they do sell them at like organic farmers markets, mislabeled, but also that's partly because Caleb doesn't know. They're not making any profit, by the way, of course. And just generally, it's like a miserable several years of trying to settle in and do this. Caleb and Natalie's relationship is just not even really a relationship. Like, Caleb and her are apart most of the time, and that is what we see in the 1800s. That's what we see when we start the book. They basically spend very little time together as a couple. they don't have sex, like, at all, because, like, they had sex, like, on their wedding night, and maybe a little bit, but then it's just totally dropped off, because he just can't get hard, for her, it seems. But also, for her, because he does watch porn. She at one point discusses how disgusting it is that he is watching porn and how this makes him like a freak and degenerate kind of thing, and she's so grossed out by it. And then we do get a description of what the porn is, and it's literally, husband plus wife, real couple, fuck passionately for 1 whole hour. Intense kissing leads to squirting orgasm. Amateur couple have hot, intimate fuck session. Lots of pussy licking. Like, that is the porn that he's enjoying, and she's like, oh my god, he's a freak. He's so nasty. And, like, it's the most, like, tame stuff that is related to, like, again, he's in a marriage, but he's like, never got hard when they've been together, and eventually to have their children, because one of the stipends that the father-in-law puts is, like, you need to have a ton of kids. So what it is that he just, like, comes into a bowl and she turkey basters herself to get pregnant. And that is what she does for all of the kids. Like, she just is not actually having sex with him, and they just give up on trying. He just spends all day in the barn, in the fields, and he even has his own computer room in the barn. So he's hanging out there on his message boards, which, thanks to her, increasingly gets more and more radical right-wing and manosphere. Like, he starts believing all these insane conspiracies, like that everybody in New York is so sick and has really short lifespans because New York has more rats than people, and it's just so infested of disease. Everyone's dying because New York is just, there's rats everywhere, constantly making people sick. And Natalie is aware of conspiracy theories and kind of views them as dumb. Like, there's this thing where sometimes Natalie's narrative is saying things that are ridiculous. Like, she thinks about, like, the threat to white people in America at one point. But she also hears a lot of, like, the more extreme conspiracy theories and things that Caleb is saying, and is clearly doesn't believe them, but she never challenges him on them. She seems just basically content to ignore Caleb all the time. At one point, like 3 years in, her Natalie's mother and sister visit, and the trip isn't going great overall because the farm looks bad, the house looks bad, and Clementine is wearing, like, clothing that doesn't fit her by a lot because, like, she's like a toddler and going through growth spurts. And Natalie hasn't kept on top of that. So she's wearing a notably too small dress when her mother and sister visit, which the mother, like, you know, calls her out on in judgment because Natalie just isn't taking care of her kids. She doesn't show that much interest in them. She never liked Clementine. And even as she's kind of over a lot of the big sweeps of her postnatal depression, she still just isn't actually showing them attention. While her sister is there as well, her sister says that she's getting a divorce, which is so shocking and upsetting to Natalie. Her sister has been in a horrible, I think, abusive relationship with the guy that she dated in high school. Natalie never liked the guy, never thought the marriage was a good idea, and her sister is on, like, her 5th child with this man because they've just been having kids like crazy and is absolutely miserable. But Natalie just blows up at the idea of divorce just because it is that thing of the stigma around it and the idea that it is the worst thing you can do, even though her sister is in this absolutely horrible relationship. Let me see. I'm going to... And the mother is kind of a bit disapproving, but not as extreme as Natalie, because this is what the sister asks, and why am I getting divorced, Natalie, if you know so much? Because your husband is mean and dumb and drinks too much. He probably calls you names in front of the children. He probably hits you sometimes. I pause, waiting for Abigail to confirm or deny this hypothesis, but she remains silent. her expression so still, so fathomless in its depth that it looked like a great body of water at night. And so I went on, ignoring the terrifying stillness of my sister's face, ignoring, too, the horrified expression on my mother's. He's lazy, too. He's never done anything with that shop. The man is, and has always been, a loser, but now it's becoming harder for you to bear, and so now you, my poor sister, have somehow gotten it in your head that you will be better off without him. And I'm sorry, Abigail, you will not. You will be a single mother of 5 living on food stamps, I snapped. That is what you will be. You don't even have a job history, Abigail. My God, you're lucky if they hired you to bag groceries with the teenagers in town. And she continues, like, I'm skipping a little bit of text. Have you thought about where you'll live? You can move in with Mother for a while, but not forever. And then what? You've never lived on your own before, Abigail. Do you know what it takes to apply for an apartment? Do you even know what a credit score is? And she just keeps going as her sister and her mother are like, stop. Do you honestly think the rules don't apply to you? That you can just waltz away from all your responsibilities completely unscathed? Do you think Bryce won't file for custody? Of course he will. He'll be remarried within the year, and then he and his new bride will fight for the children just to spite you. He'll say you're a cruel mother, a drunk, and the judge will agree with him. And before long, you'll be seeing your children every other Saturday. They won't even know you. And just absolutely is so horrible to her. At the same time, though, Natalie is thinking about how she did have to sign a prenup, and how the ranch is entirely in Caleb's name, which is drawing into the fact that she's telling her sister, you absolutely can't leave, because Natalie can't leave. Natalie never expresses that she would want to leave. She's convinced herself that she has to be here, and this is what she's doing, and she will make it into the right kind of life and existence. But Natalie has no money or financial assets, and didn't finish her college degree, and is also just kind of here and only on the merit of marrying a very, very rich husband who will just do whatever his father says to do if there is any kind of divorce or any situation like that. So yeah, their life continues on the farm. Natalie eventually becomes an influencer, which starts a bit slow, but becomes this thing that, like, basically financially, the father-in-law, after a number of years, is going to slowly reduce the money that he's giving them. They're not making any money at all. And this is very worrying because they have no prospects otherwise. They literally are only here for so many years because there's a super rich father-in-law funding them. And he has no problem withdrawing funding because they're in the middle of nowhere and they're no one, and he can talk about his son being a rural farmer, but as long as no one really finds out the hard-hitting details, and they probably wouldn't, it doesn't really matter to him if they actually are successful in any way. And so what happens is that she decides to start doing the social media, and it's this thing where, like, at one point she spends hours trying to get the perfect photo, and at first she's trying to get a photo with Caleb and Clementine and their young son. It's one of them, like Stetson or something, but they don't really matter. And she then spends hours trying to get the perfect photo again and again and again until all of them just kind of they go behind the camera, and then they eventually walk away until finally she gets, like, the right picture. And it's said that she just looks completely exhausted in all of her photos and her videos. She always looks so tired and has a bit of an uncomfortable smile. But these are all things that she views as things she can just fix in appearance only, you know? She at one point starts training herself to smile better. What really kicks off her career is that Caleb shares the social media that she has on one of his forums. He's gone deeper and deeper into this, like, manosphere, and it goes really, really well. Like, this guy is some sort of, I don't know, Joe Rogan podcaster type. So he talks about how she is this. Okay, here I have a little bit of. I found it. So I'm going to read a little bit about what is said as he's on this, like, live podcast. Let's see. This is the kind of woman who is going to get our country back on track. None of that city woman equality of the sexes bullshit. No, this is a wholesome, traditional Aryan wife. He flipped through the photos of my Instagram pictures, creating a flipbook effect of me smiling all over the farm. Man, if more families in America acted like this family, think about it. Celebrating nuclear families instead of degenerating them. Cherishing the separate and equally valuable roles of man and wife instead of constantly challenging them. Eating local, working the land, and spreading good Christian values. I gotta say, I'm sold. We'll talk about this more after a quick break from our sponsors. And so after that, her followers spike thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Like, she eventually very quickly reaches 1 million. And that means that she can start making more success, actually making money off of things. She realizes, especially from hearing this guy talk about their life, she's like, that isn't accurate at all, but that is the idea that people want to be sold. And so she leans in further and further on doing that. Eventually, she hires a producer. The producer is named Shannon. I mentioned her earlier. There was something at the very beginning of the book about some sort of horrific assault that happened with Shannon on the farm, and also that Shannon was having an affair with Caleb. So now we get some more about how that actually what happened. Shannon is like not at all a person who you would expect, or Natalie would expect, to be involved in the producing side of this like trad wife life content. She has like dyed pink hair and a nose ring, and she's from Brooklyn, but she actually at first finds Natalie really inspiring. Like, she's kind of really into an anarchy commune kind of stuff. So she's like, I really love that you're, you know, going independent and you own your own like means of production and things like that. But then as they go and take a tour of the farm, it just immediately falls so quickly apart because the farm is not really that successful and they're hiding so many things. Like, they're hiding that they have day workers. They're hiding that they have 2 live-in nannies. They say that like the children are homeschooled, but the children are very badly homeschooled. Like, Natalie says that, oh, they're actually like getting so much personal one-on-one time that they're probably grades ahead of the other kids. And then when they're having a picnic at one point, Clementine asks, because of something that said, what's an ocean? And she, you know, Natalie's like, oh, honey, you know, it's like, no, you're thinking of, it's like a big body of water. And Clementine's like a river? I don't think that she knows what a lake is either. And Natalie's just really trying to do this, but Clementine just never doesn't know what an ocean is. Like, they're clearly not getting actual education. Shannon also finds that, like, she's living in a shared room above the barn with the 2 nannies. So they're not even getting good accommodation there, and they're not getting great wages either. Like, Natalie thinks to herself that she says that she's paying them a good wage, but she knows that she's really not. Like, it's probably decent, but obviously she could afford to give a lot more and probably not have them all share bunk beds in a small room above a barn. But she doesn't. So, despite all this though, Shannon sticks around and Natalie finds herself oddly compelled by her, because Shannon is just like not the, when she looked for a producer for her online content, basically everyone who reached out was a identical good Christian woman. So the fact that Shannon is somebody different who is still interested in her and interested in this like life and also does good content really intrigues Natalie to a degree that she keeps thinking like, I need to fire her, but also never fires her. And what eventually brings up to this affair thing is that Natalie the father-in-law is a politician and he's going for his 3rd presidential bid. And he's been leaning in more and more on the manosphere. They're using manosphere a lot, which I feel like I'm against the term, but I don't know, it's so specific. But the manosphere, the conspiracy, the right-wing MAGA kind of stuff. He's leaning in very hard on that and the conspiracy thing. He keeps thinking about how there's going to be a civil war soon, and the fact that civil war is coming becomes a part of his campaign slogan. And as he's getting a huge amount of success and is kind of being set up to go, Shannon goes with the family to one of these political rallies because Natalie refuses to get political in her content. Like, the father-in-law pressures her to try and make like a post promoting him or even promoting some of the things that he's running on as ideas. And she's like, look, I'm just not going to do that. I will show up at your campaign rallies with the family, but that's all I want to do. I'm not mixing family and business. But so she goes to one of these rallies, Shannon is there, and there's some very extreme stuff going on. And Shannon talks to her afterwards about the speech. And so here. Natalie, that speech was terrifying. I mean, I know your father-in-law is intense. I always knew he was intense, but don't you think that was different? And Natalie gets distracted looking at the kids who are with the nannies. Natalie, I turn back to face Shannon. What? Tell me what you're thinking about all of this. I sighed, tried to think back on the speech. Something about coastal cities, the world so clearly losing its way, nuclear families disintegrating, and the children. The children, my mother gasped in memory. The children, and the women, and then certainly the men. But Doug, the father-in-law, had spoken so quickly, and the speaker system echoing and reverberating in on itself had warped everything so quickly. America, Doug roared in my ears still. America, America! How long have we? How long till we? America, oh, where are you? It was a combination of 1,000 conversations I'd heard throughout my life. The only difference in my mind was that it had been dumbed down a bit and maybe sharpened at the tip. He's going to win, Natalie, Shannon said when I didn't say anything. You do realize that, right? That he's going to win? I rolled my eyes. It's a performance, Shannon. It's political theater, not real. How is a political election not real? I don't mean that. I gesture at the crowd around us. All of this, the showmanship, the bravado. Do you honestly think there are no consequences to performance? Listen, you've known from the very start who my father-in-law is. Right, she snapped. But the person I haven't known is you. I paused, looked at her. These people are talking about the same bullshit Caleb talks about. All that crap about rats. And then when Doug said on stage about returning to the days of yesteryear, he was practically quoting your Instagram captions, word for word. And so Shannon continues to be like, this is bad and this is wrong. And Natalie is just really detached from it. And this is clearly a very crucial point of things because Natalie is so detached from all of this. She really does view all of it as performance and things that aren't actually going to have impact. And that's obviously how she views her life as well. How she's putting on this entirely, and she knows, very fake performance of this perfect life. But she just thinks it's a performance and people want that performance. People want to see these idealized things. They want to hear these idealized and simplified ideas. They don't want to deal with reality. And because people know that, they know that they want that. And I know I'm giving that. This isn't harmful. But after that point, Shannon sits next to Caleb in the car. And this is basically where they start talking. And it winds up that this is what starts them having an affair. And Caleb is the one who tells her and basically is like, I'm in love with Shannon and we're gonna make this work, but I want to move away to New York to be with Shannon. And Natalie is so pissed off at Shannon and starts accusing her like, how could you do this? How could you seduce him? Shannon's like, he said you wouldn't care. And there is this interesting thing where Caleb believing that Natalie wouldn't care totally makes sense because Natalie doesn't care about Caleb really. Like, they really don't have a real relationship. They just have this, sometimes for the cameras, they will be acting lovey-dovey, but it's just that performance. Outside of that, they really have nothing. So Caleb just thinking that, like, he could have this affair and it wouldn't even really count, like, he should guess that Natalie would be angry about that because it ruins a lot of her, image of a life. But yeah, I'm not surprised that he thought that this wasn't a real relationship that he was in his marriage. And Shannon is also like, okay. Shannon also calls Natalie out about their relationship. Natalie, I watch the way you treat Caleb. You act like he's dumb, like he's a little kid who needs to be protected or something. He's not as dumb as you think. In fact, I think he's pretty smart. Look at this. He figured out a way for you to create a wet dream for him to live inside of, and he found a way for you to do it so that you thought it was your idea. And now he just gets to exist in this psychotic little snow globe you built just for him. And in spite of all that, you somehow go on thinking that this was your idea, that you're the one who is in control. Natalie goes, this was my idea. Do you know why Caleb likes me so much? It's because I'm the only person on this farm who treats him like he's a person, not a project. I listen when he speaks. I ask questions. I call him on his bullshit. I talk to him I talk to him like I'm a real person, like he is a real person. And if he takes that experience and assumes it to mean we're in love, then all that proves to me is how bad his understanding of relationships really is. And Natalie calls her a homewrecker, and Shannon continues, actually, I'm not. This is what I'm trying to say to you, Natalie. In order for me to be a homewrecker, you would have to have a home for me to wreck, and you don't. You don't even have a family. What you have is a business. Your nannies know it, your farmhands know it, your husband knows it. And someday your kids will know it too. And you know what? I think they're going to hate you for it. I think they'll never forgive you. And as a last punch here, Natalie just starts to try and mock her, like, was it fun, Shannon? Was it fun getting fucked by a man who can't even maintain an erection? She was supposed to look horrified, or maybe ashamed. Instead, she looked concerned. Oh my god, Natalie, is he not hard when he has sex with you? Which, it really is just you, Natalie. It really is that Natalie is not nice or likable in any way and just continuously gets worse. Like, her sister has cut off all contact to her at this point, and her mother has recently been going to a more progressive church, and they're increasingly just like, Natalie, have you tried ever being nice? Natalie just is like, what are you talking about? So at this point, this is where the horrific assault part comes, which is that Natalie starts to choke Shannon very, very hard. And it doesn't cause permanent damage, doesn't kill her or anything, but it's a very intense and long, hard squeezing of her neck and crushing her before she stops. And Shannon at this point quits, and that kind of goes back to the beginning of the book where Shannon had just quit, and there's this fear of a growing concern. Natalie pushes Caleb to run for office and tells the father-in-law, okay, we're doing this. There's this stuff about a plan I know I talked about, but I think that I maybe just misunderstood, and the plan was just making Caleb run for office. I thought there was maybe another thing going on, but it hasn't really come back in any way. And where we left off, where I'm at in the modern day story, is that Caleb is going to run for office, but Shannon is coming forward about this assault, but also about all of the fakeness of the ranch. So Shannon has tons of photos and videos and everything, and also just firsthand experience about how bad Natalie is and how badly the ranch is run, all of the lies behind it, and now also this attack on her. So she is going to go on a major news slot and talk about this. And the father-in-law, this is a big threat to his campaign, has got a bunch of lawyers together, and everyone's just really freaking out. Natalie is starting to grow convinced that she's going to be thrown under the bus because that makes sense. If the father-in-law and such and Caleb get together and just say, Natalie was the problem, then yeah, okay. I think that is exactly what they would do. And Natalie tries to tell this to her mom, and her mom just eventually hangs up on her after telling her you're a bad person. And she's just increasingly abandoned. So that's where I am there. Pastimes. Let's get to that twist part, and then I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I think I've been talking too long, but I'll finish the book up and return, probably not today, because I have to go play Magic the Gathering. So, what happens in the 1800s is that Natalie is walking in the woods, and she sees a log cabin off of the trail, and she decides to go towards this log cabin. Like, the trail doesn't connect to it, but she sees it. As she gets closer, she sees something very blue in front of it, and then it starts to click for her. It's a truck. It's a modern truck. And that the smoke is rising from the chimney. Above the front door, a word is etched into the door frame. Manosphere. So that's where I left off, is this revelation of, okay, we are in a fake scenario of some kind, because there's a modern truck and there's a cabin that says Manosphere, which I find really dumb. I think that calling it the Manosphere is like fine, but I think that like using it in this way where it's like they've named their manly meeting house is dumb. But I guess these are dumb men. So with this, I think I know what's going on, and I'm concerned that I'm not gonna like it. I think that we're in I'm gonna spoil something, but it's not a very good film. And I'm worried that we're in a don't worry darling situation where, like, basically, I think she's being trapped in a facsimile of an old-timey idealized life in order to control her and trap her by a bunch of these, you know, very misogynistic, obviously, people. There's some weirdness about it, though, because, like, who are these children? But what I more specifically think has happened is we're in the future. And we're actually, I think, in the future by a good number of years. I'm pretty sure at this point that old-timey Caleb, who she's called Old Caleb this whole time because he looks like an older version of himself. He's more weathered, which if he was his correct age but had lived in the 1800s, this would make sense because you do look older when you've lived through harder existence. But I think he's just actually Old Caleb. I think that it's been like, I don't know, 10 years or something, maybe even more, and he is older. And I think that she is older too, because one of the first things that happens when she wakes up in the 1800s is that she kind of goes to look for a mirror, and there isn't a mirror, because there wouldn't be a mirror. Like, pioneer families do not have mirrors. That's incredibly impractical. And there's not been any, like, still clean water that she could look at a reflection. I think that at one point she does, like, look at her hands and think that they look a bit, like, rough. But also, if she was living in the 1800s, then her hands would look rougher than they would in a modern world. But I think that she is also older. I have no answer for why she fell asleep one moment and woke up here, or what's up with these kids. But I'm pretty sure that what has happened is that the father-in-law won the election, and as he warned of, America went into a civil war, and large swaths of it, maybe all of it, regressed to an 1800s-esque state. She is literally on her own farm and her own property, but one of the reasons it looks so weathered is that it's the future. Maybe they did some replacement. I guess they would have taken out some of the technology, like her fridge and stuff, but it's very similar. So I guess they renovated this goddamn house for like the third time even. And I don't know why she's being forced to live here, why they would be controlling her but keeping her in this way. Maybe they did something like brainwash her and she's only like just woke out from it somehow. I really don't have answers on that, but I am pretty sure at this point that that is what we're about to go into, is that she's in the future, and because of like the messaging of like, you know, it's not just for appearances, there are real consequences to these things and what you're putting on and the presentation to the world. The father-in-law actually did a bunch of this horrible stuff and caused, I don't know, big war, and we've regressed, and she's trapped here, and I don't know why she'd be trapped, why they would be controlling her like this. It feels like if they really wanted, they would be just killing her. Like, it's not like she's particularly valuable beyond having children. I don't know if those children are her children. They might be. I really don't have answers to that part. And I'm sort of like pausing because I'm trying to think, is there like anything else I can guess about this? Oh, the two neighbors. There's these two neighbors that we're seeing that she's like, the eyes feel so familiar. I think those are her sons. I think those are her grown, more adult sons, because it's weird that there's two of them and she had two sons, and she didn't really know her children. Like, she really was spending no time with her kids. At one point, she like meets one of the nannies and there's a kid by her feet and she thinks, oh, there's a strange child by the nanny's foot. Oh, wait a second, that's Jessa, that's one of my kids. Because it had been like so long since she'd really, perhaps not seen her, but like properly processed her. Because she uses the kids for content and things, but she just isn't spending time with them in any other capacity and doesn't really care about them in any real capacity. Beyond like what they are in a really broad representative way. So yeah, I think those are her two sons who are now adults. And I don't know what's happened with the rest of the kids. I don't know if her new children in this reality look a lot like her and Caleb had kids. So it could be that she was, like, she's been acting as like the perfect repressed wife for a while, but then like Mary reacts to her freaking out like it's happened before, so maybe this sometimes happens. Again, there could be some level of like mind control going on here. But yeah, there's not very much left in the book. I'm interested to see where it goes. I kind of have a feeling I'm not gonna think that this ending is like as off the rails as Roxane Gay says. I don't think it's gonna like thrill me or excite me, especially because there's just so little left in the book. But yeah, we'll see. Okay, hi, okay. I have now finished Yesteryear, and okay, so good news, it didn't go how I thought it was going to go. Suddenly now, I'm like, oh, my predictions were ridiculous. They were so silly. They just didn't. But I do think that maybe the book was trying to make me think a few of those options. Anyway, the ending is like completely different from what I thought. I disagree with Roxane Gay. I don't think it's a wild roller coaster thrill ride, but the twist is different from what I thought it was going to be. And I think that is absolutely for the best. Do I like it overall? Just the twist part? It's better than what I was thinking it would be. Let me tell you about it first, okay? Then we'll go. So, in the 1800s, we are following as Natalie finds this cabin. It says Manosphere above the door. There's a truck. She goes in the cabin and it's just like there's a TV, there's some modern stuff, and one of those neighbors is there and he's peeling the price stickers off of produce and putting that in a pile and then like sorting it out. And when he sees her, he is very shocked and then he calls her Mama. And so, yes, indeed, right away, confirmation that those neighbors are in fact her sons. Her sons from the 2020s time, because we absolutely are in the future. But it's not a Civil War situation. So, she runs off and is really freaked out and just is running around in the woods for like a long time. She gets lost and she just winds up back at her property. And as she's walking back up to the house and old Caleb is there, a different car pulls up, very, very conveniently timed. And out of that car steps somebody who looks completely identical to Natalie. Or at least what Natalie thinks that she looks like, because she's actually older than she thinks she is. And this person looks like exactly like her, which is a good throwback to the fact that Natalie didn't think that her daughter Clementine, her firstborn, looked anything like her and was very disturbed when people said that, you know, your newborn baby looks just like you. And this is Clementine, who is now an adult woman. And we are approximately like 20 years in the future. That's actually what the 1800s is. I'll probably keep calling it that. So, how did we get here? Well, that brings us back to the 2020s. I'm gonna just keep saying timeline, but you know, that part of the book. So, producer Shannon is coming out with this like tell-all about what happened, and there's a lot of things, like little details that she gets wrong, but obviously that doesn't change the fact that like everything she gets right about all the horrible stuff that goes on. And part of that is that Shannon talks about the attack where there's a choking going on. And she talks about it in a way that also kind of alleges that there might have been something sexual to it, which is not something I brought up, and it's left very ambiguous. But basically, during the time when there is the choking is happening, there's this emphasis before the choking happens that Natalie walks into the room, Shannon is not expecting her and doesn't have her jeans on, so she's in her underwear and a shirt. But Shannon then puts on her jeans. This is, explicitly laid out. She puts her jeans fully on. Then when the choking happens, Natalie kind of blacks out and isn't really, she really dissociates herself out of it. And Shannon's jeans are like pulled most of the way down and her underwear is exposed. So there isn't anything explicitly sexual that's happened. Like, Natalie thinks to herself, they probably went down, like, from all of the movement when the choking was happening, but also that's not usually what happens with jeans. And so there is kind of an implication of maybe something a little bit, probably more as a, like, power control kind of thing than something explicitly sexual. But I'm bringing this up because it is kind of important, because it becomes a further thing and an accusation put on Natalie, where her father-in-law didn't know about the choking part, and he gets super angry, and especially because there's also this level of maybe implied sexualness to it, sexual deviance to it, of course, because if she's actually gay, that is so much even more of a mark of shame. And later Caleb asks her as well, like, are you queer? And she is very in denial about this. And I never thought that Natalie was, but actually very early on in the book, there is this section, and I'm excited because it's in the very first part, so I'm going to go and try and channel my customer service voice again. I like doing that. I used to have a D&D NPC whose voice was exclusively customer service voice, but then dialed up to like 11. She was the absolute worst. She was an all-powerful, like, god deity, but she spoke like that. And I really enjoyed doing that voice. So there was this one bit where very early on, I did flag it, and I just kind of went, Natalie, are you projecting? And definitely as a further occurring theme in this book, as we see quite a lot as it's developed, she does project a lot. And so I'm going to read a bit where, God, it's very long, but it is fun to read, where Natalie obsesses over other women, specifically women she has a connection to in any passing way. So she remains obsessed the entire time with her old college roommate. She projects so much about how this college roommate's life is going to turn out. And another one is this woman, Vanessa, who she went to school with briefly. And that's the brunt of their connection. They weren't friends or anything. But when she bumps into Vanessa at Target, she just puts a million things on Vanessa's shoulders that are not present in the social interaction. And one of these things is what made me flag, Let's see. So specifically here, Natalie makes a bit of a reference that kind of mildly implies an invitation for Vanessa to visit the farm. It's not an actual invitation. It's not something that is explicit like that, but that is what is the start of this, so. Her face turned a bright shade of pink. Oh wait, I need to get my voice right. What am I doing? Hi, how can I help you today? Her face turned a bright shade of pink. I knew it was the kind of threaded offer that would catch her in her molars. She would know the offer was half-hearted, but still consider the possibility anyway, because Vanessa probably wanted to see my picturesque little farm in person more than she wanted anything else in her life. The chickens, my ladies. The big red barn, which photographs so beautifully in any kind of light. The gardens, oh, the gardens. The pseudo-erotic fantasy of us baking my signature lemon zest cake together. The two of us laughing at some stupid thing. Our children playing peacefully together in the background. None of it would ever happen. And yet, the idea of that impossible day would sit there, growing bacteria in the back of her throat for the next week or month or year. A profoundly humiliating desire, as strong and confusing and animal as the ones that inspired her to watch lesbian porn on low volume while her husband was sleeping next to her. She was definitely the kind of woman who watched lesbian porn on low volume while her husband was sleeping next to her. That is the part where I was like, that's, are you doing that, Natalie? And again, there's never any explicit confirmation that she is at all queer, but Also, I just want to read a bit more of this, so I am. Grind away, Vanessa, I thought, smiling beatifically. Go ahead, give yourself a migraine thinking about me. A notion so pleasurable it was worth the guilt that came wrapped inside it, like penny candy. She would think about my famous little farm for a year, and then she would bite the bullet and order one of my branded Dutch oven sets, $250, made in Taiwan, and she would mail it to a friend's house, one whose name I didn't recognize, so that I never found out that she personally gave me money. That's how much this woman hated me. That's how much she hated herself. Say you'll come sometime, I said one last time, smiling wide. Please, just say it. Thanks, Vanessa said shortly. I will. She looked like she swallowed a bottle of Advil. I beamed in reply. We said a few more pointless things, long enough for Vanessa to take a few more obvious glances at my body, noticing, no doubt, that the skirt hanging loose around my hips was the very same one I'd worn in school a decade earlier, and long enough for me to pointedly ignore her body altogether. Do I even have to say it? We said goodbye. As I turned the corner of my girls, Vanessa threw a middle finger at my back. I didn't see her do it, but I felt her do it. I swear I did. And who could blame her? I had the life she always wanted, the life she still wanted, but could no longer admit. Vanessa was liberated, sure, but I was happy. And it was such a shame, wasn't it? The way some women so willingly compromise every ounce of themselves in the name of building a life for themselves that they didn't enjoy. So, that is just a really fun, this is, the first part of the book is where like almost, like all of the humor is. There's a lot of, again, accolades on the front and back of this book talking about the humor, and it's really only like this one beginning part that we really get a lot of that. But that's a fantastic section to read, actually, especially in hindsight, because that is kind of the entire thesis of what Natalie is doing. She is projecting so hard onto this woman in every single way, not just about like, oh, I know that she flipped me off secretly, even though she didn't. And the way that she is like, this woman is so desperate to be invited, but actually Natalie is the one who's like, hey, say you'll come, please say you'll come. And Vanessa actually is just like, yeah, thanks, I will. Like, there's nothing there, but Natalie sees everything there. And the way that Natalie, of course, is the one who thoroughly compromises herself in every single way to build a life that she does not enjoy in the slightest, and has some awareness of that, but has to find an excuse for herself to say that she loves all of the things that she has never once made her happy. So, Natalie, we can put a pin on the idea that she might have some sort of repressed, leave a pin there. We're not going to take it out. It's just going to exist. Something a little repressed there, maybe. And that just becomes another thing that makes her so much worse. Like I thought she was going to be thrown under the bus, but actually most of that comes from the fact that she didn't tell her father-in-law about this choking thing, because that is really the main last straw. The fact that they had these horrible farming practices, that they were lying so much, all of these things is really not important because they could recover from that. And the fact that it was kind of implied that Caleb did the assault, that would have been recoverable from. But the fact that it was Natalie who did that, and that Natalie maybe has something gay going on, that's the problem. That is something that cannot be recovered from. There's a very specific, just like, paragraph that outlines this clearly, so I will read that. if only my husband had raped our producer. That was basically what Doug, the father-in-law, said that night. What he roared for hours and hours while a rotating cast of side characters, me, then Amelia, then finally just the lawyers, stared numbly at nothing. If only his stupid little son had raped our stupid little producer. If that had happened, it would have been over with and forgotten in 2 weeks. But a predatory woman? Unthinkable. A good Christian mother and wife who, allegedly, found other women attractive? Who took what she wanted without asking? Kill the witch. Burn her. So, Natalie freaks out and just is going into a whole disassociative vibe, I would say. Like, obviously, like, this is everything so bad. And she already knew that all of this was something that she really couldn't recover for. But that doesn't mean that, like, living it out is any better. As she's just flooded with all of this hate, and also that there doesn't seem to be any path forward for her life and existence. And so she tries to commit suicide by taking some pills, but it just kind of makes her numb and a bit out of it. It doesn't have any, like, lasting effects. Caleb goes to confront her, and the last section of the book is called The Future. And the previous ones were the past, part 1, the present, the middle, and then the future. And so this is where the two stories really begin to overlap. There's a lot of cutting between paragraphs and little bits of things happening. We're also getting interludes from an interview that Natalie is giving further on in the future. And so we're just jumping around between the 1800s, this interview that's in a further future point, and also explanations of what happened after Shannon came forward with the allegations. And that is sort of the answer to, how did we get to this 800s thing? So basically, what happened is that Natalie went to the father-in-law, and it's a little bit unclear, but basically convinced him, like, you know, I'm gonna go and totally reform myself and prove myself. And by the way of doing this is that she basically sought to become what she was pretending to be. So she is the one who really decided and took the initiative, and it progressed over the years into full on, she wasn't just putting on this facade of pretending to be this, like, pioneer wife homesteader. She actually became and started to live the life of it. Her video content was described as getting a lot more intense, and then eventually she shut it off completely. And the house was rebuilt to become more authentic, though it is said later that it's not really that authentic. It's her idea of authentic. So even her, and like, her 1800s pioneer life is still a facsimile of what it actually is. It is still just another layer of pretend and another falsehood that she is clinging to define her identity, rather than being true and rather than being an actual life in, like, any way. So Natalie, over the years, begins to just live like this. Let me see. On good days, I am calm. I believe that if I do a good enough job, if I prove to the world that I really am living out here on the land as an honest woman, a good Christian, a traditional wife, then the angry women will eventually forgive me, and the momentum will swing back in my favor, and the state of Idaho will drop all its pending charges against me. The ones the lawyers warned would come before Doug paid them all off. Sexual assault, aggravated assault, improper working conditions, wire fraud, animal abuse, child abuse. Do you see? If I finally, actually, and truly became the thing I claimed to be so long ago, then no one could call me a liar anymore. A liar anymore. A liar anymore. A liar. And starts to just repeat. And so we understand that she just descends into just mental illness. That is kind of what the twist is, as it's already kind of been implied by me saying that this is the thing. She is the one who built this as she's been the one who's built all of her hells, to be fair. Like, she's the one who has put herself in all of these situations. It's not to say that, like, obviously in a broader sense, there are a lot of these expectations of, like, the church and men and other things like that, but this definitely is a character, and it's a lot stronger for the fact that it's about Natalie and how she is the one who has made herself this horrible life that she hates in every way, but constantly justifies and lies about internally, externally, in every single way. It's just like a series of fake things that she is enduring. And, you know, with the children, what happened is that gradually they started more and more leaning in. Like, the excuses were like, we're just playing pretend, we're just doing it as a summer activity to family bond, there was this thing, and then more and more everything is just falling away as they fully embrace this weird lifestyle of being like, it's fun, she would say, and nothing is fun. Nothing is fun about this at all for anybody. But it just descends. And so what happens is that when Clementine turns 16, so that is about 4 years after the assault with Shannon happens, when Clementine turns 16, she takes all of the children for a walk and never returns. And that is, the only child who is left is Mary, who in the 1800s time is her eldest. That's not actually her eldest, though. That is her, oh my god, I have to count her children. She has so many kids. What's Clementine? There's 2 boys and then there's 2 girls. So Mary is her 6th child. And Mary is very young and she's the only one who's left behind. Clementine takes all of the older kids and leaves and moves in with Natalie's mother, who lives in town, basically, like a ways outside of this very rural ranch. And at this point, Natalie lies to Mary, who's quite young, and says that all of her siblings died. And this is a reference to something else, where I think I mentioned this, but I didn't mention all of it, where Natalie growing up, her mother always said that her father died when actually he just left. And that became this sort of excuse in the way that they all thought about it. It was a lie that they all knew was a lie, but that they would repeat and say because it was sort of the more palatable lie. And that is obviously a very big and character-defining thing for Natalie. It's something she repeats here. And she repeats here with her young daughter, despite the fact that something that she learns shortly before the Shannon incident happens is that her mother confesses, after her mother's been going to a more progressive church and kind of changing some of her ways and reflecting on her life, her mother says that that was a lie, that her father didn't just leave because he was having an affair and then just like ran off. What actually happened is that Natalie's mother had an affair and Natalie's father really wanted to make it work and wanted to stay around, and it was Natalie's mother who ordered him to leave and just rejected him. And Natalie's mother didn't actually want to have him in her life at all, and ultimately preferred being like more of a single and independent woman, but she also needed that like lie of like, well, he was the one who did the bad things and he's the one who died/left. And obviously that is a mirror to so many things that Natalie is doing in terms of these more palatable lies, these more presentation of what other people want to hear and see. So after Clementine leaves, again, it's been a total of about 20 years. So that is the case that Natalie gave birth to 2 boys, and then her young girl, Maeve, after all of that, while living in this fake pioneer time. And it's really, really rough. It's bad. And what we're meant to understand is that Natalie it becomes delusional, I guess. Like, this is kind of my one problem with this ending, and I think that it makes sense and is a lot better than me being like, maybe it's a crazy dystopia. But I do kind of have a lot of questions about the mental illness portion of this, which is just not really explained. Like, something that comes up a couple of times near the end of the book is the idea that Natalie does have some sort of mental illness. This is pointed out before she goes into this delusional pioneer time. But also that could be something that is being said about her as an explanation for her behaviors in a sort of, negative, derogatory way, rather than it ever being something that's ever diagnosed or, described. And again, that is fine. But what we have of Natalie and what we're meant to understand from the book that we just read is that she has good days and bad days, but she's mostly been living and fallen into a complete delusional state of believing she is actually an 1800s pioneer. Caleb knows better. Caleb is actually, when he's out working the fields or whatever, he mostly just heads over to hang out with his sons and they watch TV. And the produce that they get is just store-bought produce that he brings back and is like, here's the harvest. All of it is, when they don't have fish or traps, they do have traps and do try to fish, but they basically never get enough to actually live off of. It's all just store-bought stuff that the adult sons are providing. And again, it's just actually still a lie. Caleb knows about this and is just enduring. The children don't know because they're kept at home. And Natalie is delusional and fully believes it. Sometimes she has good days and bad days, so it's kind of implied that maybe sometimes she does properly process the fact that this is fake, but we don't ever see that. And what we see in the book is that she just kind of wakes up from it. She stops having this problem. The whole time that we follow her narrative, she does move through different ideas of coping mechanisms, like believing that this is a reality TV show, believing this is a sacred thing from God, but we never see her fall back into that delusional state of fully thinking that she is a pioneer. And even if we were to, I'm not saying we needed to see that happen on page, but we don't have any, periods of time that the fully self-aware Natalie experiences as, a blackout. That would be, I guess, what we're approximately meant to believe has been happening for these many years. Her realizing that it's been days or weeks or that she said something or done something that she doesn't remember because apparently she's been jumping in and out of, degrees of realizing what is happening in her reality. But instead, we just experience this, at this book part, she wakes up and she's like, oh my God, from my last memory, I was, just hearing about Shannon maybe going to go forward with some claims. That's her last memory. And then from there, it seems like she just has a cohesive and full experience of being awake and thinking that she's been kidnapped or whatever in the pioneer times. And that is the one thing that really kind of sits and bothers me a little bit, just because it feels like it's something that exists because that works for the book's narrative. We're following her the whole time and we're left with the mystery, but it doesn't fit fully to what the answer is to what her life has been to get to this point. The explanation that we're given about why she, woke up like this is basically, Natalie provides it, actually. She says that when I found out I was pregnant again and everything changed and I realized I had to leave because I can't give birth in this place again. The births have been so traumatic and horrible because they have no medicine or any skills. Except Natalie is 50 years old. This is what we hear. Adult Clementine tells her this. She's 50 years old, and Caleb, I think, is one of them is also you're going through menopause, so you're not pregnant. She realized that her period stopped at some point in the pioneer times, but the answer is that she's going through menopause. And so I guess we're kind of left to understand that because she started going through menopause, it snapped her permanently out of her delusions. That isn't something the book is trying to assert as something meaningful or a message or anything like that, but I guess that is what I'm left with as an answer to this one thing that kind of bothers me. She's totally delusional and then she basically stops being delusional. She just has some mild coping things like that, but not the whole I fully believe I'm a pioneer in the old days. But then, she has menopause and then she's mostly better. So what happens is that adult Clementine rolled up to the cabin because one of the adult sons called Clementine because Natalie was running around the woods acting all wild. And this was like very conveniently timed because Clementine has been working to get a warrant to get custody of the other children. So Clementine rolls up and is like, I have a warrant now and I'm taking all of your kids because this is not a safe environment. So Natalie takes all of the children, Clementine takes all the kids and leaves. And then Natalie and Caleb are left just at the cabin alone, standing in the driveway. Natalie has kind of fully processed that she's been in a delusional state for at least 16 years. And then they kind of like look at each other and they're like, I think we should divorce. I think I hate you. He's like, yeah, I think I hate you too. And then they just sort of, they walk off. They walk off together, but we are to understand they walk off apart. They just leave it behind. And then the last part of the book is an epilogue that's set 5 years later. And this is just where we get an interview section, sort of. Like, not all of the interview. But Natalie has returned to the cabin after 5 years and is sitting down to give an interview about her experience. She seems to be a ward of the state. I don't think that's the term. She's like jailed or held or something. Like she has manacles on and like things like that. But she's agreed to give this interview. She specified it had to be with her old roommate, whose life she had all of these wild imaginations about, but has actually just had kind of like a normal life. That's the thing, is that Natalie has always been so obsessed with how everybody is so unhappy and going to live these wild fantasies of disappointment and failure, but actually they're having normal lives, and she's the one who is not having a normal life or experience. And Natalie gets very obsessed while in the house again that this is not her house. And they're like, this is your house, it's in the same location, it really hasn't been touched. And she just keeps insisting this is not the same house because, again, just all of that distance and all of the ways that this house has been many things to her in many places, and leaving and coming back, and it's just completely unfamiliar. And she talks a bit about her experience. At this point, her voice actually goes a lot back to the first part of the book, where she does become a lot more, I'm gonna call her a bit silly. She's a lot more like petty and kind of saying a bit more audacious things casually. It's kind of a weird mix. She also reads a lot more like she is just... She talks to her college roommate, for example, and starts asking a lot like, did you have a family? Tell me about your family. I want to know. Because she still has that behavior of needing to compare and think that she has the superior family and house and everything when she has none of those things. She does not have any of her kids. She never really had any of her kids, to be fair. She never had a marriage. She never had a house. Like, all of these things were all fake, but she is still so obsessed with how other women are having those things and if they are doing it to her standards. So the very, very end of the book becomes that Mary has released a memoir about her experiences, and the college roommate is like, reads it out to her. Like, they talk about it a little bit and then read some of the text out. So the very end of the book is only just like 2 pages of this memoir from Mary's perspective as she is reflecting 5 years later on what she went through. And it sounds very fascinating, and it sounds also so familiar. And it really starts to, this is not the kind of thing that I have actually watched a lot of or engaged with, but it really does make you think about like those reality TV families and how like all of them, especially the ones of kids, especially the religious ones of kids, years later, there is so much always fallout and horrible things that even if there isn't somebody in that family who is like a full-on criminal or abuser or something, there's still always so much trauma and mess that comes out of those situations. And Mary's memoir is really reflecting on how she comes out into this world and she doesn't know how to write anything except for her own name and then Mama and Papa, because she's still not receiving a proper education. She doesn't know what anything is and doesn't understand the world at all. But in her reflections, she just thinks about how she doesn't hate her mother. She feels very bad for her mother. And I'm going to read some of that text, because again, I really like this, and it really hits on another theme in this book. Clementine says our mother will never read this book, but I know she will someday, and so I want to address her directly now before I tell my story, the whole story of what it was like to grow up on and eventually escape from Yesteryear Ranch. Hello, Mama. I miss you. Isn't that funny? Even after everything, I still miss you. I miss your temper and your jokes and your strange little moods. I miss what it felt like in the rare moments that a true smile lit up on your face. I want you to know I'm sorry you got so lost in yesteryear. I'm not sure if it's your fault, but I don't think that matters as much as some people say it does. I know it was hard for you either way. There's a lot about our life that makes me sad, but do you know what makes me saddest, Mama? How much beauty you've missed. Because it really is beautiful, this future you prayed we would never get a chance to see. I think you'd like it if you gave it a chance, but that's something I've learned in the years since I left the ranch. You cannot change people who refuse to be changed. You can only love them. So here it is, all the love I have to give, pressed into the pages of this book. I hope you read this book one day, all the way to the end, because as it turns out, the place where your life ends is exactly where mine begins. The moment when I saw the world and wanted every part of it. So, that's really good. Yeah, like, because that is the other thing, is that they're just, you do really, like, this is a book about Natalie, and it's just about Natalie in so many ways, and I definitely, at some points, really felt like I wasn't getting her character as much as I wanted. As much as this book is about her character, there are some bits where I'm like, I wanted to see more reasoning and thoughts about certain things about her. I felt weirdly that a lot of the religious aspect is kind of like so much of this book is absolutely about the Christian cultural context that she's raised in and how that shaped her, but it's so much more about that culture than her own relationship to God and to religion. But at the same time as I say that, I think that that is absolutely a lot of the point, is that she doesn't really have a deeper contemplation or relationship to God and to Christianity. She has a relationship to the church and the community and the shape of it and the expectations of it than she has any thought about what she actually believes, why she believes is definitely a stretch, but what she believes. That's not really there. She just believes the things that she has been told she has to believe. And I think that that is absolutely a thing in that culture that she's from. So yeah, end of the book. I definitely like this book. I definitely think that like it's really, I have that like again, oh, I feel so intimidated because it's just not I know that I've talked so much. It's not a genre that I really read. I think that this might be literary. I don't really know what literary fiction means. More advanced, proper books for thinking folks. And, you know, I definitely think that I understand it and have a lot to think about on it, but at the same time, I do still have that extra step of like, I am outside of so many of the experiences that this character is going through and the book is commenting on about the roles of mother, especially mother, women, Christian woman, all of these expectations of gender and self and presentation that I like have no connection to and opted out of when I have had any relationship to, that there is that extra distance where I'm like, I can appreciate this and like so much of it, but I also think it would be so much more hard-hitting if I had that connection, and I think that a lot of people would really like it who do have that. Like, this is not a book that I would recommend to any of my friends because I just don't think that they have that extra thing. Like, there isn't enough of a speculative nature to this, there isn't enough of a time travel, historical nature to this, that there's anything to gain if you're a fan of those aspects. And I would say that, like, myself and a lot of my friends are more into that kind of side of things, where this is so much more about you know, those very specific other things about the roles and culture and expectations and facades and all of those things, which are very fascinating. I just kind of think like, I could recommend this to my mom, and I think that that's kind of like a person who would enjoy it. But I also think like, you know, there's definitely a lot to enjoy here and a lot interesting. I talked about so much of this for so long, and there's still a lot of bits that I did not really address or get into at all. I think the writing is good. I really at no point felt slogged down by it or like let down. I didn't feel like it was overly or under descriptive. I had a good time with it. I wish Natalie's voice had been a bit more consistent, but really that's it. I mean, there's broader things too where I'm like, Caleb is a really fascinating character, but I definitely feel like, you know, he's not fully developed in a way that I want to understand him more, but I also am like, that doesn't really matter because this is really just about Natalie. And so, you know, what is her husband? He's her husband. He's not really a full person in her mind. So it's not exactly surprising that some of his motivations, like why he has stayed at this ranch this whole time and what he's thinking, are absent. Like, that really isn't the point. But yeah, okay, Yesteryear. I think yay, I guess? I'm saying yay. I think yay is too strong for my feelings, but I don't have a lot of negative things to say about it at the same time. I really did like it, but I think that I liked it in the way that I would appreciate a lot of, like, art film, where I'd be like, that's really interesting, and the themes are really interesting, but I wouldn't return to it and, like, rewatch it and really feel it on, like, a very close level. Okay, those are my thoughts.